The Himalayas, majestic, spiritual, and untamed. For travelers, they promise freedom and self-discovery. For Odette Houghton, a 24-year-old from Australia, they would become her last chapter. In August 1991, she disappeared into the mountains of northern India, leaving behind only questions, whispers, and the chilling legacy of what would later be called the backpacker Bermuda Triangle. Odette had been living in India for around a year after a period of overseas travel. She was last seen by her family in April 1990 in Thailand and was wearing her hair in dreadlocks and an earring in her nose. Her regular contact with her family ceased in August 1991. It has been established that in February 1991, Odette was in Bangalore for the winter, then in Rishikesh, Uttar Pradesh, for summer, then back to Kudli Beach, Gokaran, Karnataka. She then moved to Manali in the mountains of Himachal Pradesh. Odette is reported to have been living in a commune 34 kilometers north of Manikaran before she went missing. Her father, Edward, would later remember how his flower child daughter would visit him at his insurance office, dressed in tie-dyed shirts and pajama-style pants, completely unbothered by the stares of his conservative colleagues. She was an adventurer at heart, a street performer who'd mimed in the streets of Japan for money and sold chocolate-covered strawberries for $5 each. She loved street theater and would perform as a mime in the streets of Japan to make enough money to get by. She also had the idea of getting strawberries and covering them in chocolate to sell for $5 each. She was an entrepreneur in many ways. In those final months before her disappearance, Odette had found love with a Swiss man named Stefano, 10 years her senior. When her family questioned the age gap during their last reunion in Thailand, she'd laughed it off. "Stop fussing," she'd said. Nobody knew those would be among her last words to them. Marie chuckled as she wrapped a parcel of Vegemite and tea tree oil. We posted it to an address in an area called Manali. 2 months later, in August 1991, the parcel was returned to us. That returned package was the first sign something was terribly wrong. Care packages from home, Vegemite and tea tree oil, little pieces of Australia came back unopened. The silence that followed would stretch into decades. At the same time, Odette vanished. Swiss national Marianne Heer also disappeared in the Parvati Valley. 2 young women from opposite sides of the world, swallowed by the same mountains in the same year. They would be the first of many. Edward Houghton would spend the rest of his life searching for his daughter. Edward retired at the young age of 50 as the case of his missing daughter began taking its toll on him. He traveled to India multiple times, plastering missing person posters across mountain villages, interviewing locals, pleading with authorities. In 1996, 5 years after Odette's disappearance, we returned to India, following the backpacker trail into the mountains, then back down to the popular tourist spot of Goa on India's south coast. As we put up posters, young foreigners would chat to us. When he met other backpackers who hadn't called home in years, his pain would boil over into anger. "Your poor parents," he'd shout at them. "Think of how worried they are." The Parvati Valley itself seems almost designed to swallow people whole. Parvati Valley sits in the western Himalaya, in the small state of Himachal Pradesh. The region is characterized by towering peaks, glaciers, hot springs, and rugged terrain. It's a place where every movement exists on a knife edge, where a wrong turn tips a vehicle over an unbarriered cliff edge. A wrong step pitches a traveler into the churning maelstrom of the river. A wrong turn sends a hiker to ranges unknown. Picture: driving along its single road. There is only one road in and out of the Parvati Valley. It's a narrow track, roughly paved in parts, washed-out dirt in others, along which rattletrap buses swerve and screech to a crawl with inches to spare as they pass. Mountains rise up one side and cliffs drop precipitously down the other, often hundreds of feet to the Parvati River below. The milky blue waters, named after a benevolent Hindu goddess of fertility and devotion, seem inviting, but can be a powerful, violent force. But it wasn't just the treacherous terrain that made the valley dangerous. Concepts such as communal living, detachment from material goods, meditation, and getting in touch with the divine beckoned backpacking hippies from around the world. They visited temples and holy sites, spoke to holy men, lived off the land, attended psychedelic raves in the forests, and took plenty of drugs. The valley had become a magnet for spiritual seekers and hedonists alike. But apart from its spiritual significance and natural beauty, the Parvati Valley is home to an unofficial drug empire. Illegal hash and poppy plantations are scattered throughout the region and hidden at higher elevations. Locals also grow datura, or devil's weed, for its psychedelic properties. The famous Malana cream, a high-end product drawn from cannabis, is sold at almost Rs 3,000–4,000 per 10 units at Malana, while its demand in the international market has been very high. Year after year, the disappearances continued. As foreigners flooded through the valley, stories of attacks and disappearances proliferated. In 1991, 2 women, Australian Odette Houghton and Swiss Marianne Heer, vanished. Almost every year, at least one person went missing. In 1996, 5 years after Odette disappeared, Ian Mogford of the UK disappeared in the Parvati Valley after reportedly telling his father over the phone that he had befriended a sadhu. It is not beyond the realms of possibility that, for some reason, my son got attacked and is lying on the bottom of a gorge, Mogford's father told the Telegraph. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. The authorities noticed something else too. Authorities determined a distinct pattern. Apart from a couple of women, most of the missing persons were male backpackers in their 20s or 30s. Young men, seeking adventure, enlightenment, or simply a good time. They'd arrive full of life and simply vanish. The new millennium brought no relief. In fact, the disappearances seemed to accelerate. In July 2000, months after Alexei Ivanov's disappearance, 2 German backpackers, Jorge Weirauch and Adrian Mayertasch, were shot as they slept in their tents. Jorge was killed, while Adrian escaped with 4 shotgun wounds to the leg. 1 month later, British civil engineer Martin Young, his Spanish girlfriend Maria Girones, and her son Cristobal were beaten while they slept in their tent, with only Martin surviving. These weren't disappearances. These were murders, brutal and undeniable. The valley's reputation grew darker. As journalist Harley Rustad writes, the Parvati Valley has earned its own nicknames, the Valley of Shadows, the Valley of Death. Yet still, the backpackers came. Fast forward to a summer evening in 2015. In Kassel, the unofficial capital of the valley's backpacker scene, posters started appearing on every corner. A young face stared out from them. Bruno, a 24-year Polish national working at Ernst & Young in Poland, was trekking solo in the Parvati Valley. He was last seen in Manali on August 8, 2015. According to his Facebook page, he was to go trekking in the Parvati Valley from August 9th. He has been missing ever since. Bruno Muschalik was supposed to be on a flight home to Poland on August 22nd. He embarked on his 3-week trip to India on July 30, 2015. He reached New Delhi Airport on July 31st. He had a return ticket from Delhi to Poland for August 22nd, but never made it back home. His last message to his girlfriend was simple. His last message is dated August 9th, Sunday morning. He wrote to his girlfriend that he has already packed his belongings, left some clothes in the guest house for laundry, and is ready to leave. After this, his family and friends lost all contact with him. Bruno's father, Piotr, refused to give up. Dad Piotr later arrived in Kulu and even announced a reward of Rs 1.5 lakh for his son to be traced. He also arranged for an aerial survey of the region, but all to no avail. When the local police investigation stalled, Not satisfied with the police efforts made to trace him, his father, Bruno Muschalik, moved the High Court. Now, a special investigation team, SIT, of the CID is probing the matter. In August 2015, a 24-year-old Polish national named Bruno Muschalik disappeared. He was last seen in the village of Barshaini. Police arrested 2 people from Delhi and Manali in connection with the disappearance, but it remains unclear what happened to Muschalik. His father continues to search to this day. Years have passed, but those posters still hang in Kassel, faded by sun and rain, a constant reminder. Then came Justin Shetler. If Odette Houghton was the Valley's first mystery and Bruno Muschalik represented its modern face, Justin Alexander was different. He wasn't just another backpacker looking for cheap thrills. Alexander established a reputation for being fearless. But Alexander was also adept in the more contemplative forms of awareness, including Brown's practice of returning to a single square foot in the wild, a sit spot, to listen and notice slight changes in the environment. Justin was 35 years old, an experienced wilderness survival expert who trained at Tom Brown's tracker school in New Jersey. When he heard from someone at the tracker school how to fall safely from a tree, he climbed 50 feet up and let go. The technique is to grab and release branches to gradually slow your fall, but Alexander missed some, ragdolled the last 20 feet, and slammed into the ground, narrowly avoiding cracking his skull on nearby rocks. When my greater fear told me no, Justin would just go for something, McElroy says. In 2016, Justin arrived in the Parvati Valley not as a tourist, but as a pilgrim. Andrei Garpon, a 47-year-old Russian man, had spent 3 months on a self-made, spiritual retreat in the Parvati Valley, deep in the Indian Himalayas. Walking alongside was an American man, 35-year-old Justin Alexander, a seasoned traveler and experienced outdoorsman who'd impressed Gapon with his wilderness survival skills, having just spent weeks living in a mountain cave. He'd been living in a cave with a sadhu, a Hindu holy man named Satnarayan Rawat. Justin had posted on social media about his experiences, sharing photos of himself with long hair and beard, carrying a flute staff, looking every bit the spiritual seeker. His Instagram feed, Adventures of Justin, painted a picture of a man who'd found what he was looking for. On September 3rd, 2016, Justin posted something cryptic. "Don't look for me." Now Alexander was embarking on a 3-day trek to a holy site called Mantalai Lake, where he would camp under the stars with few supplies. When Justin didn't return from his trek to Mantalai Lake, his friends raised the alarm. She boarded a plane to New Delhi on October 9th, connecting with a friend of Alexander's, Jonathan Skeels, en route in London. Skeels had briefly crossed paths with Alexander over the July 4th, 2015 weekend in Big Sur, California, and had remained in touch with him. His mother, Suzanne Reeb, flew from Oregon to India, joining the search. The story that emerged from the investigation was confusing. The sadhu, Rawat, first claimed Justin had continued alone to the lake. Then his story changed. He said they'd turned back due to bad weather. On October 15th, 2 days after Reeb had filed an official missing persons report at the district police office in the city of Kullu, near the mouth of the Parvati Valley, Rawat was apprehended and brought before her and Skeels. Then came a grim discovery. Locals found Shetler's belongings on the banks of the Parvati River, and authorities concluded that he might have died in a landslide. His distinctive flute staff was found on a rocky slope near the river, but no body was ever recovered. What happened next shocked everyone. Police arrested the sadhu, but he hung himself in his cell before his release. A couple of months later, the police arrested a sadhu, Godman, who had accompanied Shetler. The sadhu committed suicide in custody. Whatever secrets Rawat held died with him. The police closed the case, adding Justin's name to their growing list. The police effectively closed the case of Justin Alexander, just one more disappearance in the Parvati Valley. "We cannot conclude the possible reason of death," the final report read, "but we presume that he might have been abducted by someone with the intention to kill him." In the district post in Kulu, his name was added to the list of vanished foreigners. Status: untraced. The pattern was undeniable now. Since the early 1990s, dozens of international backpackers have vanished without a trace while traveling in and around the Parvati Valley, an average of one every year, earning this tiny, remote sliver of the subcontinent a dark reputation as India's backpacker Bermuda Triangle. The numbers were staggering. More than 20 foreigners have gone missing in the Kulu Valley in the last few years. Till 2020, before the pandemic outbreak, when the government asked all foreigners to leave the valley, 21 foreign nationals had mysteriously gone missing in Kulu. Police officials had their theories. Additional Superintendent Nishchint Singh, Negi says, "Initially, my notion was that he had taken some drugs and gotten lost. We have so many instances of that, people falling in the river. But after finding out that Alexander had spent so much time with a sadhu, had lived in a cave, and carried a flute staff, the police included his 'Don't look for me' post in their official report as important context for his disappearance, that he could have been yet another foreign backpacker with a case of India syndrome, who had dropped off the grid on purpose. Some believed the disappearances were connected to the drug trade. Police are understandably hesitant to entertain the theory that a serial killer has been preying on foreign tourists in the Parvati Valley. They are adamant that some of the disappearances are undoubtedly, if tragically, linked to the valley's drug trade. Others whispered about something darker. The majority of disappearances have involved men in their 20s and early 30s who fit a profile of adventurous travelers seeking to push themselves physically or spiritually. This profile has led to a theory that a single serial killer has been lurking in the forested hills for decades, preying on a particular kind of traveler carrying valuables such as cameras and passports, drugs, and cash. Some speculate that the killer is a Hindu holy man, while others believe it is a foreigner who blends in with tourists to hide in plain sight. There was historical precedent for such fears. Charles Sobraj followed a set pattern: befriending tourists, robbing them of passports and money, often traveling under their identities, and in some cases, murdering them. He was eventually arrested in 1976 after drugging a tour group of French university students in New Delhi. Sobraj became known in the media as the Bikini Killer for some of his more high-profile victims in Thailand, and the Serpent for his ability to evade authorities and his escape in 1986 from Tihar prison, India's most notorious penitentiary. He was arrested again in Kathmandu in 2003 and imprisoned on a life sentence for the 1975 murder of 2 tourists in Nepal. But the Parvati Valley's mysteries ran deeper than any single killer could explain. It's not difficult or unusual for foreigners to deliberately drop off the radar for the full duration of, or even illegally beyond their travel visas. One Israeli man lived in the valley for decades, growing and dealing hash, getting married and having a child, until he was arrested for overstaying his visa. About 17 years ago, an Austrian national made an appearance after remaining missing for 12 years, when his parents and the Austrian embassy in India had lost all hopes of him being alive. The man had stated that he wanted to go missing out of choice so that he could live in complete peace. Stories like these gave families hope. Maybe their loved ones had simply chosen to disappear. Then came March 2021, and the case that would bring renewed attention to the valley's dark reputation. Dhruv Agarwal, a 32-year-old businessman from New Delhi, was video calling his family from Kasol. He had finally reached the enchanting Parvati Valley in northern India after an overnight bus ride from New Delhi, and wanted his family to see what he was witnessing, the emerald Parvati running through the valley, surrounded by the snow-capped mountains of the Himalayas. He was just panning the phone from one side to another, recalled Agarwal's sister, Manika, excited to show us the scenery. But the network was patchy, and his video kept freezing, even though the family could hear him. At one point, Manika said there was a sudden jerk, as if he had bent over to pick something up, and the call got disconnected. That is the last time. The family heard from Agarwal. The search for Dhruv revealed disturbing patterns. Solo male travelers reported being approached by groups who would befriend them, offer drugs, then rob them. Solo male travelers have reported being lured and drugged by a group of girls. Some escaped to tell their stories. Others, like Dhruv, simply vanished. The local economy had become dependent on this dark tourism. The Parvati Valley attracts tourists from the world over, as it has gained notoriety with easy availability of drugs and rave parties on full moon nights deep inside forests. Foreigners as well as India tourists venture deep into rural landscape with the most picturesque villages of Kasol, Tosh, Rasol, Malana and Manikaran offering hotels, guest houses. Superintendent Agnihotri says the locals are not really under suspicion. They actually treat these foreign tourists better because of the way they have helped transform the economy of Parvati Valley and brought fortune to the people. I'm from Manali and never like going towards Kasol side anymore because almost everything there, from the small cafes to very large and fancy hotels, are built on drug money or to cater to tourists coming for drugs. The stories kept coming. In December 2022, Abhinav Mingwal from Uttar Pradesh arrived in Kasol. Abhinav Mingwal from Sahibabad in UP reached Kasol in Parvati Valley on December 16, 2022. The last he was in touch with his family was on December 31st. Another New Year celebration, another disappearance. Then in May 2023, Akshay Sethi from Mumbai became number 27 on the list. It has been 15 days, and there is no trace of Akshay Sethi, the Mumbai boy who disappeared from Kasol of Parvati Valley of Kulu on May 28th. The place has earned the dubious distinction of keeping its sinister secrets. The better substitute for the word secret here is disappearance or gone missing. Till now, in the last 11 years, 27 trekkers, 21 foreigners and 6 Indians have gone missing from Parvati Valley. The valley's geography itself seemed complicit in hiding bodies. When a body does turn up, it is often pulled from the torrential churn of the Parvati River, which during the monsoon summer is capable of carrying a person downstream or consuming one in its undertow in a blink. But it is the dearth of bodies that turns the Parvati Valley into India's backpacker Bermuda Triangle. However, around 20 foreigners have gone missing in the past 3 decades, and only one Russian national's body has been traced so far. Former police officers spoke candidly about the challenges. The information about a person having an accidental fall doesn't reach us in time. Only when their family members or friends search him/her, the police get to know about it, said a former superintendent of police. Gulu, now retired and settled in Shimla. In the rest of the country, hotel and guest house owners are required by law to log their patrons into an online database. But in the Parvati, the vast majority travel in and out without record. The isolation and lack of regulation only add to the draw. The valley operated by its own rules, creating perfect conditions for people to disappear, either by choice or by force. Some locals had darker stories to tell. Nothing wrong with marijuana culture now in so many parts of the world, but the economy and backward living conditions in Parvati Valley plus drug trade has made it very ugly there. All locals know how dead bodies turn up near the Parvati River the whole time. Hell, a police officer once told me about the large number of crimes that get reported here that shocked me so much at that time. The theories about what was happening multiplied with each disappearance. Some blame the mountains, as in any range there are gorges and cliffs that can trouble inexperienced, and even some seasoned hikers who push themselves too high and too far beyond their capabilities and lose themselves to a wild animal, down an errant turn on the trail, or to starvation. Yet nearly all paths within a day or two's walk lead to a village. Others pointed to a more spiritual explanation, that some visitors experienced what psychologists called India syndrome. Rustad says that, beyond drugs, another form of illegal activity has long flourished in the valley, providing cover for people wishing to disappear. Foreigners can become so enthralled with the land and its culture that they overstay their visas and disappear into the wild. A desire to escape their lives and dreams of spiritual enlightenment might make for a dangerous mixture when combined with easy access to cannabis and opium. The case of the two French trekkers in 2017 added another layer to the mystery. In the previous year, two French trekkers, François-Xavier Camille, 21, and Valentin Gorges, 20, disappeared somewhere in the Daulada Ranges, and the authorities have now suspended their search operations. Young, experienced, traveling together, and still they vanished without a trace. The impact on families was devastating. Frantic appeals are made by hapless parents, even promising huge sums as rewards to locals for providing any clue about their missing sons and daughters. The helpless parents venture into this completely alien world in search of their loved ones, with the assistance of their respective embassies. They would arrive in India, post rewards, hire helicopters, plead with police, and usually leave with nothing but questions. I went to see a clairvoyant who told me Odette was still alive. I've kept trying to trace her, but I've found nothing. We might never have closure. Edward Houghton's words echoed the pain of dozens of families scattered across the globe, all united by the same terrible uncertainty. The writer Aditya Kant, who grew up in Kulu, watched the transformation of his home region with growing alarm. In his debut novel titled High on Kasol, based on these mysterious disappearances, Kulu-born journalist and author Aditya Kant has tried to retrace some of the stories behind the missing persons. Kant says his focus has been to unravel the changing trends of drug trafficking and substance abuse, which is affecting the lives of youth in the Hill State. The plot revolves around the mysterious disappearance of an Israeli woman who falls victim to a drug syndicate. The woman, a former commando of the Israeli army, comes to the valley to unveil the mystery of missing foreigners, but she herself disappears in the Magic Valley. The pandemic of 2020 brought a temporary halt to the disappearances when the government ordered all foreigners to leave the valley, but as soon as travel resumed, so did the vanishings. The valley seemed hungry again. By 2023, researcher Harley Rustad had spent years investigating the phenomenon. Harley Rustad's investigation into the 2016 disappearance of Justin Alexander, a well-known spiritual traveler, brought global attention to Parvati Valley's dark history. His research uncovered dozens of cases of tourists vanishing without resolution. Rustad wrote, "In the Parvati Valley, the land doesn't take you by accident, it selects." His book, Lost in the Valley of Death, serves as a chilling reminder that Chalal Vanishing Trail may be more than just a dangerous trek. It might be something no one truly understands. Local authorities tried various solutions. 2 years ago, Kulu's Deputy Commissioner IAS Officer Yunus launched a web app for the benefit of tourists, which can be used to call for help in case of any problem in the forested valleys. But few have taken advantage of it. How do you protect people who come, seeking danger, who want to lose themselves? The Chalal Trail, a seemingly innocent 30-minute walk from Kasol, had become particularly notorious. Just a short hike from Kasol lies Chalal village, a serene Himalayan hamlet with an ominous reputation. The Chalal Vanishing Trail has seen dozens of trekkers disappear over the years, vanishing into dense forests without a trace. The trek from Kasol to Chalal is relatively short, crossing a narrow suspension bridge over the Parvati River. This well-known path then winds into dense pine forests where mobile signals vanish and daylight dims rapidly under thick canopies. It's on this trail, and further into routes leading to Rasol and Malana, that the Chalal Vanishing Trail begins to earn its grim nickname. The landscape itself seemed designed to disorient and consume. The Parvati Valley is one of India's most scenic yet most treacherous landscapes. Its deep gorges, thick undergrowth, and strong river currents provide a perfect setting for both accidents and secrets. With multiple unmarked paths, abandoned shelters, and wildlife threats, it's no surprise that even trained search teams have failed to recover remains. Former Director General of Police I.D. Bhandari offered a blunt assessment. Former Director General of Police Himachal Pradesh I.D. Bhandari says the prime reason for the disappearance of foreigners and other tourists in the valley has been their tendency to venture out into unexplored and dangerous treks, which are surrounded by tough terrain and wildlife. It becomes more dangerous for those who are venturing out under the influence of drugs, which makes them more vulnerable, he observes. But this didn't explain everything. Not the pattern of young men disappearing, not the complete absence of remains in most cases, not the stories of travelers being deliberately targeted. In 2022, yet another case grabbed headlines. Earlier in 2022, 22-year-old Vijay Masari Jadeja was hiking from Kirganga with 3 friends before disappearing. Unlike many others, Vijay wasn't alone. He was with friends. Yet somehow, in broad daylight on a well-traveled trail, he simply vanished. His friends' confused accounts only deepened the mystery. The economic transformation of the valley continued regardless. But growing cannabis and using it for sharas as money spinner in Parvati Valley and nearby Malana is an accepted reality. Now, it's also a story of rags to riches for several families who are investing their ill-gotten money in properties, hotels and homestays, or buying luxury cars. Every cafe, every guest house, every trekking company, all depended on the steady flow of adventure seekers, even as those same adventurers kept disappearing. Some visitors came specifically because of the danger. They'd heard the stories, seen the Netflix documentaries, read the blogs warning them away, and it only made them more determined to experience the valley for themselves. They'd joke about becoming another statistic even as they ventured deeper into the mountains. Easy money plus. A drug-consuming lifestyle has brought all kinds of crimes to these parts of the state, from petty theft to murder, both from the insiders, locals, and outsiders as well. The valley had become a lawless place where anything could happen, and often did. The mystery deepened with each passing year. It's not the deaths that make the Parvati Valley unusual. It's the disappearances into forest or mountain or valley with little trace. And there are more accounts than those noted in police registries and written into headlines that make the news, shared as stories and desperate pleas from family members posted on online message boards and travel forums with scattered details. Communication with loved ones and friends ends abruptly, with a final letter, phone call or email before blinking out, leaving faint trails for heartsick families to follow. The stories followed a haunting pattern. A final message home. I'm heading into the mountains for a few days. A last social media post, a sunset over the valley, a selfie at a temple, then silence. Forever. It wasn't just foreigners that were vanishing. Indian hikers also disappeared in the region. The valley didn't discriminate. Young Indians seeking adventure met the same fate as Israeli backpackers, Polish trekkers, American spiritual seekers. The mountains swallowed them all with equal indifference. By 2025, the official count had passed 30, though everyone knew the real number was higher. Several media outlets determined that 20 to 30 foreigners are missing in the area, but locals say the number is much higher. How many disappearances went unreported? How many solo travelers had no one to miss them? How many families had simply given up hope? The investigations continued, but they always seemed to hit the same dead ends. Thus, barring some stray incidents of killing for ransom by porters, mainly Nepali nationals in 1 or 2 cases, there is no clue of their current condition or possibility of return. Each case file would eventually gather dust, another untraced added to the growing list. Reports of missing trekkers have now become a routine affair, and the authorities have been issuing warnings not to trek with fake godmen who somehow manage to lure travelers into illegitimate drug purchase. But warnings seemed useless against the valley's magnetic pull. Every year brought fresh faces, eager for adventure, dismissive of danger. In quiet moments, when the mountain mist rolled in and the valley fell silent, locals would share their own theories. Some spoke of ancient curses, of gods angered by the commercialization of sacred spaces. Others whispered about organized crime, about bodies buried deep in cannabis fields. A few claimed to have seen the missing walking the high mountain passes, transformed into something no longer quite human. The rational explanations were perhaps the most terrifying, because there are cannabis and poppy plantations throughout the valley. Some hikers might have gone in search of them. It is possible that they saw things they shouldn't have, or they could have died from a drug overdose. In a place where drug cultivation was an open secret, and fortunes were made in shadows, witnesses to the wrong transaction might simply need to disappear. Each addition to missing persons lists has begged the question of all the travelers who disappeared without a trace, who were lost or murdered, and who simply did not want to be found. It was a question that haunted every search, every investigation, every grieving family. The transformation of places like Kasol from Sleepy Mountain villages to international drug bazaars had created a perfect storm. It has been 3 years now, and I still see the posters stuck on the walls of Kasol, reverberating equal parts of hope and terror. Those fading posters had become part of the landscape, as permanent as the mountains themselves. Parvati Valleys. A draw remains strong, with an average of 10,000 tourists every year. For every person who disappeared, hundreds more came, drawn by the same promises of enlightenment, adventure, or escape that had lured the missing. The saddest cases were perhaps those who'd come to investigate other disappearances. Aditya Kant Sharma says, "The plot of my book revolves around the mysterious disappearance of an Israeli woman who falls victim to a drug syndicate. The woman, a former commando of the Israeli army, comes to the valley to unveil the mystery of missing foreigners, but she herself disappears in the Magic Valley. Even trained investigators, soldiers, people who should have known better, the valley claimed them too. As the stories multiplied, so did the valley's dark reputation. Travel. Blogs warned against solo trekking. Embassies issued advisories, often dubbed as the Valley of Death and Death Trap in many tourist journals and guides. The Parvati Valley in Kulu continues to attract foreigners in large numbers, yet still they came. The pandemic years of 2020-2021 had provided an unintended experiment. With foreigners barred from the valley, the disappearances had stopped completely. It seemed to confirm what many suspected. Whatever was happening specifically targeted outsiders. But as soon as travel resumed, so did the vanishings, as if the valley had been waiting, hungry. Local police, overwhelmed and under-resourced, could only do so much. We have carried out a search operation with 2 chopper sorties after we came to know of his last mobile tower location, but it has been fruitless. Kulu SP Sakshi Karthikeyan also confirmed that Sethi's whereabouts are not known yet. Helicopter searches were expensive, ground searches dangerous. After a few weeks, most cases went cold. The impact on the region's culture was profound. The whole aura in these places is very shady now. That is the very reason Kassel became a tourist destination, for its marijuana culture. What had once been a spiritual haven had transformed into something darker, a place where ancient traditions mixed uneasily with modern vices. Sadly, fast forward 27 years and the whereabouts of Odette is still unknown. Odette's mother has since passed away. Her 2 brothers have grown up without their sister and her father. Edward is still without his vibrant daughter. Edward Houghton's tragedy had become generational. Brothers who grew up without sisters. Parents who died without answers. Children who would never be born. The pattern was clear to anyone who looked. The reasons behind the disappearances are not clear, but the Parvati Valley hides more than beauty among its high mountains. But clarity didn't bring solutions. The valley kept its secrets, buried deep in mountain snow or swept away by monsoon. Floods. Some families found a kind of peace in the not knowing. They could imagine their loved ones living in some remote ashram, having found the enlightenment they sought. Others were tormented by darker possibilities, trafficking, organ harvesting, murders too brutal to contemplate. The uncertainty was its own special hell. These are only to name a few. Locals say it is slowly becoming an insurmountable problem when people go missing and no luggage is found. Not a backpack, not a passport, not a single belonging to prove they'd ever been there. At all, the numbers kept climbing. 27 confirmed missing by 2023, dozens more suspected. Each one a story cut short, a family destroyed, a mystery that would likely never be solved. The valley had earned its nickname, India's Bermuda Triangle, through decades of inexplicable loss. Yet even now, as you read this, somewhere a young traveller is booking a flight to Delhi, planning a bus journey to Manali, dreaming of mountain adventures. They've read the warnings, heard the stories, seen the missing posters, but they're different. They're careful. They won't become another statistic. The Parvati Valley waits, patient as mountains, beautiful as dawn, deadly as the river that gives it life. It offers enlightenment and oblivion in equal measure, and never reveals which fate awaits until it's far too late. In Kassol's cafes, Bruno Muschalik's posters curl at the edges, sun-faded but somehow still hopeful. In Oregon, Suzanne Reeb lights a candle for her son Justin each September 3rd. In Australia, Edward Houghton, now in his 80s, still dreams of his daughter walking through the door, no longer 24 but somehow unchanged, ready to tell him about her adventures. Every day I dream Odette will suddenly come through the door. She was 24 when she went missing. She'd be 41 now. Time moves forward, but grief remains frozen at the moment of loss. The missing don't age in memory. They remain forever young, forever on the edge of adventure, forever one phone call away from coming home. The locals have learned to live with their valley's dark reputation. They serve chai to worried families, point out the police station to those filing missing person reports, and try not to think too hard about what happens in the mountains after dark. Business must go on. Life must go on. Even as people keep disappearing, but it's the number of vanishings combined with zero recoveries that makes Chalal Vanishing Trail a modern mystery. In an age of GPS and satellite phones, how do people simply vanish? In a valley filled with villages, how does no one see anything? In a world more connected than ever, how do so many simply disconnect forever? The answer might be that the Parvati Valley represents something primal, a place where civilization's rules don't quite apply, where the ancient and modern collide, where people come to lose themselves and sometimes succeed too well. It's a place of transformation, and not all transformations lead back to the life you knew before. As night falls over the valley, the Parvati River roars its eternal song. In the darkness, prayer flags flutter at lonely shrines. Somewhere a phone rings unanswered. Somewhere a family waits for news that will never come. And somewhere in those beautiful, terrible mountains, another secret joins the countless others. The valley keeps, the disappearances continue, the valley endures. And the mountains, as always, remain silent. Two of Odette's girlfriends, who strangely share the same birthday as Odette, still to this day celebrate their missing friend's birthday every year. This special act of remembrance shows that this young, happy, artistic and glowing woman isn't forgotten, and her memory will continue to live on. In the end, perhaps that's all we can do. Remember the missing, warn the living, and hope that somewhere in those vast mountains, peace was found, even if understanding never will be. The Parvati Valley's story isn't over. As long as seekers search for meaning in its mountains, as long as adventure calls stronger than caution, as long as the human heart yearns for transformation, the disappearances will continue. Each one a reminder that some mysteries are written not in stone, but in absence, measured not in what we find, but in what we lose, told not in words, but in the silence that follows when someone simply vanishes into the beautiful, hungry dark, and still they come, drawn like moths to flame, each one certain they'll be different, each one sure they'll return with stories to tell. Most do. But for those who don't, the valley offers only silence, keeping their secrets along with all the others it has collected over the decades. In the Parvati Valley, some stories have no endings. They simply stop, suspended forever between the last hello and the goodbye that never came.